According to a report by the Times of Israel, U.S. Jewish organizations hailed the U.S. House of Representatives for passing a bill on Thursday that included assistance to both Israel and the Palestinians. Among other things, the State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Appropriations Bill provides Israel with the annual $3.3 billion in U.S. security assistance that was agreed to in 2016. Quote, this critical funding with no added political conditions reflects the strong bipartisan support for Israel's security in Congress and the Biden administration, end quote, said the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee in a statement yesterday. They added, we appreciate the efforts of several members who worked to include key pro-Israel provisions in the bill with no added political conditions. The bill also includes $225 million in assistance to the West Bank and Gaza and a 12% increase to the Migration and Refugee account used by the United States Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The legislation also includes $50 million in funding to build partnerships between Israelis and Palestinians through the Lowry Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, and another $6 million for a program to facilitate corroborative research between Israeli and Arab scientists. The vote in the House was voted 217 to 212, with Republicans opposing the bill because it dropped a legislative provision barring U.S. federal funds from being used to pay for most abortions. J Street said it was particularly pleased with the pro-Israel and pro-peace elements in the bill. The Davish Jewish organization said it would also continue to lobby for legislation to require stronger, more specific transparency measures and restrictions on the end users of U.S.-sourced military equipment, including equipment bought with U.S. aid to Israel, to ensure that it cannot be diverted to support acts of creeping annexation or other violations of international law. The Democratic majority for Israel applauded the vast majority of House Democrats who voted in favor of the bill. Just 3 Democrats joined House Republicans in voting against the bill. Meanwhile, every other Democrat voted yes on the critical bill, demonstrating once again that the vast majority of congressional Democrats remain proudly pro-Israel. The Democrats who voted against the bill were Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Cori Bush of Missouri, who all have been vocal critics of Israel. Meanwhile, on top of this, August 1st, the rent is due. And that's a big change for many Americans who have been unable to pay rent or have been protected from eviction by a federal enacted moratorium. Now the protections are gone. Due to the widespread job loss and the health risks of the COVID-19 pandemic, many renters in the U.S. face difficulty making their rent payments every month when the pandemic began in early 2020. Approximately 6.8 million Americans are behind their rent since March of 2020. Last month, the moratorium was already on borrowed time, as the Supreme Court had warned that it would not extend the rent protection past the end of July. Several justices, including Justice Brett Kavanaugh, supported it, saying, quote, in my view, clear and specific congressional authorization would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st, end quote. The Biden administration did challenge the Supreme Court decision on Thursday, 2 days before the program was set to expire, by formally asking Congress to pass an extension. However, Congress would have had to pass the legislation to create an extension and did not do it in time before leaving for a 7-week recess. Pretty convenient. This all comes in the head as we end with one more month of summer as the fall and winter months loom. I don't know how it is in every other state, but here in New York, you have a 3 to 6 month grace period to pay back rent before the court can enact an eviction. And in 6 months, it will be the peak of winter. That's January. Considering the economic ramifications of COVID 19 with job loss and now this eviction looming overhead, the Biden administration has all but put assured and put a nail in the coffin regarding any type of reelection in the future. And this will give rearmaments and motivation for those of the far right, and we're not talking about conservatives, we're talking about the fascist right wing, to take full advantage and gain those who will leave the left in this disastrous Biden administration, which has been basically just almost a year now, 8 months, which has been nothing short of a failure to the American people. And now it's up to us to try and rectify that situation by not voting at all. Because what will it take for the American people to finally realize that the United States federal government cares more about their foreign allies by giving them hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in aid annually, rather than to the American citizenry and ensure their welfare mentally and physically. We continue to suffer under these greedy, neoliberal, anarchic, monarchic, nationalist, and warmongering congressmen and women who are only looking out for themselves, lining up their own pockets instead of sharing the proceeds to the people who voted them in to represent them.